There's a question from the web. We learned from other presenters that having one plan was important to guide the activities within PNCIMA. I'm curious how these other initiatives, parks, MPAs, reserves, can continue in independent directions prior to PNCIMA getting the master plan in place. Is this not cart before the horse? Anybody want to address that?
Well, I can take a kick at it, although there's others that may want to comment as well. There are a number of initiatives going on, and I think what we want to do is make progress. And so there's a number of ways to do that. PNCIMA, the Integrated Management Plan, has taken a long time to get this far, and it's going to take a bit more time. And I think that there's a lot of a very strong argument for making progress. And yes, we need to understand the broader context. We need to understand how these other initiatives will situate themselves within that broader context. But I think that we can fall back on Canada's Oceans Act, the ocean strategy, to provide us with that essentially that policy context, so that as we move forward, we can consider these individual initiatives within that broader policy direction and say, okay, does this fit or doesn't it? And if it fits, then I think we're okay to move forward. I mean, yes, in an ideal world, you'd have the IM plan first, and then you do your MPAs, and then you'd move that way. But we do want to make progress, and so in this situation, there are some things that are moving in parallel. And so I don't know. I mean, it would be good to hear from Wayne on this, because he is far more eloquent than I, and it may be useful to have that national perspective, because it's a good question.
I think it will be a day far away when I'm more eloquent than Rebecca on any subject, but I do tend to lean towards the point that she made. I think that's very important. In an ideal world, everything would be tabula rasa. We would start from a very clean slate and build up. We've got lots of processes underway. There are opportunities already being explored. What we need to do, and I think what we've tried to do in other areas, is try to seek convergence. Start trying to draw the threads together and corral things as they move along. We've talked often about these things, and some people like the word, some people don't like the word, the notion of a pilot or a bit of an experiment. And in some ways, we're very much learning as we're doing. And I think that as we go through that process, some of it's going to be ugly, some of it's going to be uncomfortable, some of we're going to step on our toes a couple of times. But the notion is that we need to try, the process which we've started over the past 2 days, is to articulate our values as a process and try to work towards convergence around that. And we'll work collaboratively and inclusively and try to get some early wins, and may have more successes than we have mistakes. So.
And maybe just to kind of provide an example of that is in moving forward with the Marine Transportation Working Group, certainly when we pitched the idea and sought levels of comfort and support for it, there's certainly people who said, well, why would you start with something small and relatively small? Why not do the big plan first and then chunk it out after that? And I mean, I guess the answer is because we're having trouble with the big plan. Let's learn from something that we can chunk out and make progress on, and then let's incorporate that learning into the broader plan, so that we can both make progress and learn from the work that we've done in developing the ultimate plan itself.
Table 7 has a question, and then Table 4.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Marshall. I'm the CEO for Ocean Industries BC. And earlier in one of our sessions, the subject of oil and gas came up, and Jennifer, I don't know if she's still here, called it the elephant in the room. But the real elephant in the room is that there's a very distinct conservation culture here today. And I work with small businesses. And my question is to Arnie. Arnie, when you're up there with Turning Point, I learned a phrase yesterday or today about the perception of foundations trying to buy outcomes. So I was really confused when I came to the forum, whether you're there as an elected leader of the Council of Haida Nations, or are you there as a part of Turning Point? Because when I talked to the chief councillors that I work with in the South who aren't part of Turning Point, there was some confusion. And quite frankly, there was confusion in amongst people who haven't been like camp followers of LRMP processes for the last 20 years, who don't know a lot of the people in the room, whether Turning Point is saying they represent all of the coastal First Nations. But I think there's kind of a bit of a quandary here. And so as we go through this process, the steering committee will help determine who the right and appropriate governing body will be, and then the steering committee will fall away, or how does that work? I'm really confused.
Thank you. I sit on the Coastal First Nations board as the Vice President of the Haida Nation through that process, and I come to this forum as that. But also, make no mistake about it, I don't speak for anybody that doesn't want to be part of Coastal First Nations. That's a choice, eh? That door is open. And I wish they were here to speak for themselves, and instead of vetting it through you, even if you're allowed to, I don't know that or not. But I'll let Art's chomping at the bit here too, so I'll let him take over.
No, I just wanted to make the point. Coastal First Nations, the Turning Point Initiative, doesn't speak for anybody. It's an organization made up of a group of First Nations on the coast. They speak for themselves, and there will be occasions when they might ask individuals like me to speak on their behalf. But quite frankly, they maintain all of their mandates and all of their rights and all of their title and everything else, and the office that I work out of works for them. So that's our relationship. Coastal First Nations speaks for nobody, but we work for them all, and we're willing to work for others as well. We do in many cases on land use planning. We have associate relationships with groups who are not members of that. My relationship with my colleague down at the end of the table here, Bruce Watkinson, he's my counterpart in the north. He works for the Northern First Nations, and we work together on all these issues. So,
just for clarification, nobody from those First Nations asked me. I'm Ocean Industries BC, a membership NGO, and I'm just saying that I was confused. And to some degree, I'm still confused, because my understanding is when you represent an NGO, you still have to go back to your host community that gives you the authority to participate, right? But this is a steering committee for this process that's Turning Point Coastal First Nation initiatives on the sign and Canada. Is that not right?
no, it's not actually. That's where you're mistaken.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, Coastal First Nations and our planning process, the part that we're a part of, it comes from 3 different regions. There's the Central Coast, the North Coast, and Haida Gwaii. And Arnie is not here as a member of Turning Point. He sits up here as a representative of the Haida Nation. Alex Chartrand represents the Central Coast First Nations. His alternate is Ross Wilson out of Bella Bella. And Bruce Watkinson represents the North Coast First Nations.